Is that the REIT peg? Is that what it's showing?
Well, it's showing the reedy peg is like right down in this section, but what we're talking about the layers of it, you're right that it's basically pointing to that, but what is this layer called from when I go from almost the tip of the reedy peg all the way up to the granular layer?
The surface epithelium?
Well, that's what we're looking at here. All of this is the surface epithelium. So what we're actually doing is looking at what are the 4 layers. So we went 1 and 2 are the cortified, and number 2 is the granular. And so number 3, what's the name of that layer?
I don't know.
Is it the spinous?
Okay, the spinous.
Is it the spinous layer?
Yes, the spinous layer. Good. And then just the very bottom layer is the
basal layer.
Basal layer, right? A single cell there. So those are the layers in orthokeratinized. The other thing I wanted you to notice in this picture is when you outline the basement membrane, look how highly corrugated that is. We were talking about that yesterday, how it's super corrugated, has really long reedy pegs and connective tissue papillae.
What did you say number 3 was again?
The spinous layer.
Okay, thank you.
It includes everything except that very single layer at the bottom, because that's a basal cell. And then all along that bar is the spinous layer. Okay, so yesterday I want you to see how this orthokeratinized stratified squamous epithelium that's shown here represents that's what's found in can be found in masticatory mucosa. So yesterday we talked about look how thick this epithelium is, and if I go ahead and draw a line where the entire surface epithelium is all the way up to the cortified layer, overall that surface epithelium is very thick. And like I just said, it's highly corrugated, the outline of the basement membrane. And in this case, we see orthokeratinized for the reasons we just went over. No nuclei in the cortified layer, a very distinct granular layer. So then when we go to this slide, this is also masticatory mucosa. And again, I just want to show you like how the reedy pegs, they don't quite look as long or numerous as the other slide, but they are overall pretty, with the exception of this one that kind of got cut off in the preparation. You know, we have a highly corrugated basement membrane with long reedy pegs and alternating connective tissue papillae. Okay, and perikeratinized, so it has the same layers as the orthokeratinized. So here, that's number 1. And where that epithelium, it's, you know, of course, the epithelium is actually the entire thickness, not just the top layer that it looks like it's pointing to there. Okay, and then okay, so then ileal from top to bottom, what are the names of the layers again? Starting with number 1, that's a 1 up there.
Would that still be the keratin layer?
Or the cortified, correct. And what do you notice in that cortified layer that's different about the previous slide?
The width, maybe?
Well, a little bit in that, but what did we talk about was the main difference last week? What do you see that's present in this?
Is it the nuclei?
Okay, great. Right, the nuclei are present. So we go back to this slide, no nuclei. It's not, you were right, Elio, about the thickness, but that's not really how you tell the difference. You look in here, there's no nuclei, and then in this cornified layer there are. The granular layer, there are some granular cells there, but they're not uniform across this section. So it's said to be less distinct. But like I said last week, the best way to tell these two apart is based on the cornified layer. And then Elio, what's this number 3 pointing to?
The spinous layer,
And then the lower layer next to the basement membrane?
the basal layer.
Basal layer, good. So ortho and para have the same layers present in them. So we've got these really, and again, those long reedy pegs and connective tissue papillae. So in masticatory mucosa, we're always going to see keratinized stratified squamous epithelium, but it can be either type. Somebody's got some mic interference. Okay, then let's look at picture C on your lab sheets. And if we outline the basement membrane here, and then state its overall thickness, it's not, this type of epithelium is representative of lining mucosa. It's not as thick as a general rule. It is corrugated, but it's usually not as corrugated. And the reedy pegs, we can always say, are shorter. Look how much shorter they are in that photo compared to the previous two photos. And the other way we can tell this one is that there's no icing at the surface. There's no cornified layer. Again, here we can see a distinct keratin layer at the top. Same with here, distinct keratin layer. So what are the different names of the layers here? And let's have Darian, what are the 3 layers in non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium?
So it'll be granular layer.
Yeah, basal layer is number 3, and then what's the second layer? It's similar to the spinous, but it's not called the spinous. Were you gonna say what it is?
Oh, I said, okay, now I'm confused. Wait, because I thought I was doing number 1.
Oh,
I
well,
think it must have broke up, but I don't know.
you did say, I thought because you said basal, you were saying number 3, because basal layer is always next to the basement membrane, so.
Oh, I said granular for number 1.
So the basal layer, though, is always next to the basement membrane, so it's number 3. And then notice the dark blue outline is the outline of the basement membrane, and just where I marked it with the light blue, that's the basal layer. So if I'm going, going from that direction, what are the names of the layers in non-keratinized?
Would 2 be granular?
No, because remember in non-keratinized, there's not keratin at the surface, so there's no granular layer, there's no cornified layer.
Number 1 would be superficial, number 2 would be intermediate.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so notice there are nuclei at the top, but there's no keratin there. So just kind of make sure you can see the difference. Okay, so I just want to highlight for the practical part of the quiz, I'm going to ask you, is it orthokeratinized, parakeratinized, or non-keratinized? The other thing I can ask you is, what are the names of the different layers? If I'm just pointing to one of these, then you have to identify that the layer that I'm pointing to. Or I could ask you if it's masticatory or lining mucosa. You know, if I show you this picture or this picture, because it has a cornified layer, which is either ortho or para, then you know it's masticatory mucosa. If it's non-keratinized, not as thick, shorter reedy pegs, then that's representative of lining mucosa. Now just,
Number 2 of that one again.
it's called the intermediate layer.
Intermediate. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, and then did I show you this last week? I'm
Yeah.
trying to, okay,
Yeah.
You can tell this is like the dip is like the keratin, and when it has the sprinkles, it has the nuclei in it. So this one's ortho, second one's para, and non has no covering on it or no dip. So that's just the sprinkles represent the nuclei in the superficial layer. All right, and then we did do this too, right? To show this was the close-up. Does everybody have this part labeled on the lab sheet?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So again, this shows you close up that you have ortho on the right in B because no nuclei, para on the left because there are nuclei in the cornified layer. If I go down to the granular layer, where I mark the X there, that's very distinct in ortho. Over here, not as distinct. Here's one. There's a granular cell. There's a few, but they're just not highly visible all across the row or layer. And then the spinous layers and the spinous layer is the same in both, and the basal layer, which is actually cut off, is the same in both. Okay, so that'll really be what we're covering for the quiz next week. Also, if at the end, if anybody has any questions about the homework assignment that's due tomorrow, I'll be glad to answer them.